Okay, I think we're live now. So, welcome everybody. As you know, my name's Indranuja. I'm going to be giving the second of these classes called Transitions on the Journey of the Devotee. This class today is about Narada Muni. I've become inspired in different ways by different classes Guru Maharaj has given over the years. He gave a series of classes on this particular part of the Bhagavatam called the Narada Bhagavatam, which is really Narada's instructions to Vyasadeva. And within his instructions, he actually gives a little bit of his bio, how he became Narada Muni. And actually, the life of Narada Muni has two or three parts, but it actually starts in the 7th canto, where Narada Muni is actually instructing Yudhisthira Maharaj. And there's some very interesting parts to that. And I'm just going to very briefly describe it. Right away, Yudhisthira asks him about what happened to Sishupal? How come Sishupal merged with Krishna's body? And then that leads to a whole discussion about how Jai and Vijay fell down from Vaikuntha. And I say fell down in quotation marks, they didn't actually fall down. This is part of course, Krishna's Leela or Narayan's Leela at that point. So he wanted to experience the, chivalrous, a fight, and the only people that could really fight him are his devotees. So it's kind of like a little bit of confusing maybe to some devotees that. But in any case, so he starts to describe that, and in describing that brings up the whole Nisringa Leela. And at the end of the Nisringa Leela, he describes that he was a Gandharva. And he was, I'm going to just read a little something here. Prabhupada states, one may actually become successful in spiritual consciousness by the mercy of devotees, or one may fall from spiritual consciousness by being disrespectful to devotees. Thus, in the Srimad Bhagavatam's 7th canto, Narada Muni explains who he was before receiving the mercy of some sages. And it's described that long, long ago, Narada Muni existed as a Gandharva known as Upabharana. With his beautiful face, pleasing, attractive bodily structure, and decorations of flower garlands and sandalwood pulp, he was most pleasing to the women in his city. And thus, he was bewildered, always feeling lusty desires. Once there was a Sankirtan festival to glorify the Supreme Lord in the assembly of demigods, and the Gandharvas and Apsaras were invited by the Prajapatis to take part in it. At the festival, Upabharana, surrounded by lusty women, began singing ordinary songs. Because of this, he committed an offense. So the demigods, they actually cursed him at that point, and they said, because you've committed this offense, you must immediately become a Sudra, devoid of beauty. Boom, first huge transition. So Upabharana became the son of a maidservant. We don't even know what his name was. It's really not that relevant. But as a son of a maidservant, he had a very, very lowly birth, to the point where he didn't even know who his father was. He actually lived in a little hut with his mother. And at one point, by Krishna's mercy, and this is where it kind of gets interesting, some sages turn up, and they are sheltering because it's Chaturmasya. So that 4 months is the rainy season. So the sages tend to just hole up somewhere. So they go and they find this residence where his mother is staying. So the mother serves these sages, and in the course of serving the sages, of course, Narada Muni gets to serve them too. Now, he's a little boy. He's like four or 5 years old at this time. So you can imagine this tiny little kid running around with these great sages. And what are the sages doing? Hari Katha. they're getting into this whole Hari Katha, and they're talking about Krishna specifically. And Narada Muni, as this tiny little boy, starts to listen. So that's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is they give him some remnants of their food, prasadam, their maha, the food that they have. They give him some of theirs. That completely changes Narada Muni. Second huge transition for Narada Muni. Narada Muni now becomes very devoted to these. And from a seemingly really bad situation, now we can see it's a really good situation. In reality, there are no bad situations in this material world. There's just a way of looking at these situations. And don't get me wrong, I know, like Ukraine, there's bad stuff going on, don't get me wrong, I know that. But really, if you were Krishna conscious, you could see it as an opportunity somehow or another, and there's devotees there preaching and distributing prasadam and doing different things. And somehow or another, Krishna's mercy still exists, even in hellish situations, So similarly with he was in this seemingly really bad situation. And yet he somehow or another, through maybe previous association, but still, he somehow or another got the mercy of these great sages. So these great sages then, after 4 months, they leave, right? But what happens? So Narada Muni is feeling bereft. This little boy is feeling completely bereft. His mother goes out to milk their cow, and boom, she gets bitten by a snake and dies. So again, this little boy, he's on his own. And he thinks, well, what should I do? He takes her to, somehow or another, he takes her to the little shack. He burns the shack, cremates her in the shack, and takes off. He leaves that world behind and decides he's going to find Krishna somehow or another. And it's an interesting state of mind. If you think of it, even a 5-year-old on his own in the middle of a jungle can somehow or another do it. So what does he do? He starts heading north. And as he's heading north, he gets, he just goes through different towns and villages. He eventually finds this beautiful forest. And in the middle of the forest, there's a banyan tree. And then underneath the banyan tree, he sits down. And what does he do? He meditates on the Lord. And the Lord appears to him in his heart. Here's your next transition. And when I say he appears to him in his heart, he actually sees him. It's not like he just imagines that form. Krishna is there in his heart. He sees the Lord. And he is immediately entranced by the Lord. He opens his eyes because he's in deep meditation. He opens his eyes and the Lord disappears. But he speaks to him, the Lord speaks to him. And he tells him that, no worries, you won't see me again now, but you'll also never forget me. And even in your next life, you'll remember this. So Narada Muni then, as this little boy, practices austerities, meditations. And at the end of the millennium, it says, let me just check this. So it says, O Muni, in the last millennium, I was born as the son of a certain maidservant engaged in the service of Brahmins who were following the principles of Vedanta. When they were living together during the 4 months of the rainy season, I was engaged in their personal service. So this is me quoting directly from the Bhagavatam. Although they were impartial by nature, those followers of the Vedanta blessed me with their causeless mercy. As far as I was concerned, I was self-controlled and had no attachment for sports, even though I was a boy. In addition, I was not naughty, and I did not speak more than required. Once only by their permission, I took the remnants of their food, and by so doing, all my sins at once were eradicated. Thus being engaged, I became purified in heart. And at that time, the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me. So that's Narada Muni explaining to Vyas what happened to him. He got this little bitty remnants of this food. All these sins went away. What happens when your sins go away? You're purified. That means that no longer do you have any lusty desires. You've got nothing to, you've got no karma to drive you forward at that point. And then he says, "O Vyasadeva, in that association, by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna. And thus, listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step." You know, it's worth noting that he became purified by one thing, by Shravanam, by hearing. That's why it starts with Shravanam. We can't do Kirtanam until we do Shravanam. And it's a very important point that. It's very important to hear from the great souls. It's very important to constantly hear so that we can have more and more faith, so that when our chanting becomes purer and purer. Very important. And then he says, "O great sage, as soon as I got a taste of the personality of Godhead, my attention to hear of the Lord was unflinching. As my taste developed, I could realize that it was only my ignorance, that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle coverings, for both the Lord and I are transcendental." So it's kind of interesting. Prabhupada makes a point that the process is realization of Krishna and realization of the self, and it's a simultaneous thing that we do. You know, the first part of Bhagavad Gita is about self-realization. The second part is about God realization, about Krishna realization, but they're actually simultaneous. In Krishna consciousness, you actually you realize who you are, and you realize who Krishna is, and you realize who you are in relation to Krishna. And gradually through that, as we'll read in this story, you develop your swarup, you develop who you are eternally, eventually. So he became just deeply in love with Krishna at this point. He's deeply in love. So he goes to the forest, and then Krishna tells him, he sees the Lord, and then Krishna tells him, "I regret that during this lifetime, you will not be able to see me anymore. However, in the next, you'll never forget me either." Then it describes that even at the time of annihilation, I wouldn't forget him. And then it describes, so wandering all over the earth, constantly chanting the Lord's holy name, that great personality met death as lightning and illumination happened simultaneously. Can you imagine? He met death just like that. It was like, boom, gone, you know? So that's now he's got rid of that body. No longer does he have the little boy's body. He was given a transcendental body. And then an amazing thing happens. At the end of Brahma's day, it describes he was taken back into the body of Mahavishnu. And then when he came out, he had the swarup he has now, the swarup of Narada Muni, the most intense transition ever, you know. And can you imagine, he was actually allowed to see that. He was actually given the blessing that he would never forget anything at that point, you know. So it's a very interesting description this of who Narada Muni is and what his role is. So he's described as a transcendental spaceman. He wanders all over the universe, all over the universes, and he can go to Vaikuntha, he can go to Golok, but he always wants Krishna to appear. So he's always rushing things along a little bit, you know, just like when Krishna was born in his Prakat Lila. So he went to Kamsa, and he tells Kamsa, you know, because Kamsa was being a little, you know, he decided that he'd killed the first son, but he wasn't going to kill anymore. So along comes Narada, and all the devotees wonder, why was Narada doing this? That seems kind of mean, you know. But the truth of the matter is, he wanted Krishna to get on with his pastimes, you know. So he told Kamsa, he says, Kamsa, you're neglecting this, you know. So then Kamsa got really mean and he started killing all the sons of Vasudeva. And then he started sending demons to Vrindavan to kill Krishna. And then Narada Muni is constantly turning up. He's always there in all the different pastimes. He's this very strange fellow. And then when you actually, later on, it actually describes who Narada Muni is. He's actually an expansion of Madhu Mangal. So Madhu Mangal's in Krishna's pastimes. He's the Brahmin who takes care of the puja at the house of Krishna, Yashodanandan, Nanda Maharaj's house, you know. So he worshipped Nrsingadev there, interestingly enough. And it's interesting that Narada Muni tells Yudhisthira about Nrsingadev, you know, and the whole Prahlad Charit, you know, that's the whole seventh canto. In fact, it's interesting that in the seventh canto, that is the most, other than Krishna, Lord Nrsingadev's pastimes are more extensively described than any other avatar in the whole Bhagavatam. Very, very interesting. And Lord Chaitanya loved those pastimes. In fact, Srivas Thakur is considered another expansion of Madhu Mangal, and he worships in Srivasangam Nrsingadev. So Nrsingadev is a very important aspect of Krishna. He's Keshava. He's got long, beautiful black hair. Yeah, so very interesting. He's also, another point about Narada Muni is you can remember all his births. He has this recall, constant recall, constantly turns up in the Bhagavatam. He's always explaining different things to different people. And he has a very interesting story. And I think the idea, you know, when I first started this again, the idea was to try and explain why these things were relevant, you know, like last week, Krishnadas Kaviraj, you know, when he met Maniketan and Ramdas. I mean, it was for him a huge change. Now, think about it, you know, Narada Muni meets these sages and they make him a devotee. You can't become a devotee without the mercy of the devotees. Just like when Padmanabha Swami was here, we were talking about his book, Inherent or Inherited. It's a very interesting book, and I thoroughly recommend it. If you haven't got it already, get it and read it. But it brings up this point about, is Krishna consciousness within us? Is it just kind of lying dormant? Or does it need something to get it going, you know? So that's the point, you know? It is a, you know, Krishna consciousness is a blessing. It comes from, Bhakti Devi comes to us, you know? She comes and blesses us with service. And service is a very rare thing. It's not given to everybody. It's given to those few souls who are qualified to receive the blessings. And what's the qualification? The qualification is that somehow or another you've met someone who blessed you, who actually gave you the opportunity to engage in devotional service. So these stories, these transitions, these are your transitions also, you know, just like Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. I always like to think this, Arjuna is every man. He's every single person who's ever gone there, had that existential crisis, and then realized that it was hopeless. He had no chance of getting out of this world except by mercy. Now, he's fortunate. He can talk to Krishna. But remember, put yourself in his shoes. That's the idea of Bhagavad Gita. You are Arjuna. You're there. Read it like that, and then you understand it as he understood it. And therefore, you get the mercy. Every single one of us is Arjuna in that sense. We are all craving the mercy of Krishna. And how does that mercy get distributed? Through the guru, just like, again, going back to Narada Muni. So Narada Muni discovered Vyasadeva in his hermitage. And when you read that part of the Bhagavatam, you can actually see what had happened. Vyasadeva had just spent eons compiling the Vedas. And remember, he's the compiler of the Vedas. He didn't write the Vedas. The Vedas existed, but he decided, these needed to be written down. So he invented Sanskrit. Essentially, he decided, because Kali Yuga is coming, this all needs to be written down so that in the future, people will be able to see this, because Manda Sumanda Mata, they've got lousy memories, and they're just, people in Kali Yuga are really unfortunate. They're just pathetically unfortunate. They'll never be able to remember everything. Whereas he remembered everything. He remembered the whole Vedas. And think about what that means. The Vedas are vast. They are vast. They're just innumerable. So he had them all written down, and then he had all the Upanishads written down, and then he wrote Vedanta Sutra. Okay, so he thinks, all right, so I'm going to make a summary, and I'm going to put it in short form so that anybody can understand it. Aha, right. So if you've ever read Vedanta Sutra, you'll see how easy that is to understand. Even with the commentaries, it's still complicated. So he wrote all that down, and now he's finished, right? Now, take note, he had also written the Bhagavad Purana. That was one of the Puranas. So he'd written the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Puranas. And they were all written down, and they were all given to different people. Ramaharshana Sutta actually had the Puranas. So he's sitting in his ashram, and he's feeling quite blown out, quite depressed. And he's thinking, what's wrong with me? Along comes Narada Muni. Here's an interesting transition. So Narada Muni says, you did great, well done. However, you missed the point completely. It's like, here you are, you've done all this stuff, but what's the point of all this stuff? What's the summum bonum? That was the reason he explained his story to him, because he explained to him that you missed the point. Where is the glorification of the personality of Godhead and all this? Where is Krishna's story specifically? Now, it's interesting that his son, Sukadev Goswami he was another interesting character. He had spent 16 years in his mother's womb. Even Krishna had come along and spoken to him and said, I think it's time to come out. But he was Amaram. He was like completely self-satisfied. Hey, if I stay here or if I go there, it's all the same. Doesn't make any difference to me. But then he came out of his mother's womb and immediately naked ran into the forest and just sat under a tree. He's Atmaram. He is self-realized. However, he isn't Krishna realized at this point. He's only self-realized. Okay. So his father, Vyasadeva, sends a woodcutter out and he tells him, sing these verses from the Bhagavatam. And then Sutta Goswami hears the verses and comes back. And then, of course, time passes. But then Parikshit Maharaj gets cursed to die. Sukadev Goswami is wandering naked through the entire, India, and he comes through the forest, and there's all these sages. He just pops out there, and everybody stands up. They see him. They all stand up. They say, "Hey, Sukadev Goswami's here. He should answer your questions, Parikshit Maharaj." So he sits down in front of Parikshit Maharaj and speaks the Bhagavatam. Now, the Bhagavatam spoken by Sukadev Goswami. Who's in the audience? His father's in the audience. When Narada Muni comes to speak to his father remembers his son's story. He sits down in meditation, and in this divine meditation, everything comes out. And he writes the beautiful Bhagavatam down. Now, this is not the Bhagavad Purana. This is Srimad Bhagavatam. This supersedes the Bhagavad Purana, you see. So here you are. He's now spoken this incredible tome, this story that starts and finishes with Krishna. The whole story. And it's said that, you know, when it first starts, of course, it starts with Sutta Goswami. Sutta Goswami was there also. It's all tied together. So Sutta Goswami was the son of Ramaharshana. Remember I told you about Ramaharshana? He was deputized by the sages of Naimisharanya to speak on the Puranas. For 1,000 years, he was supposed to speak. Along comes Balaram and kills him. So Balaram, by his causeless mercy, killed him with a blade of grass, kusha grass. He just killed him because he was disrespectful. And he was kind of puffed up. What does that say? That basically says he wasn't qualified to speak the Bhagavatam. He can speak the Puranas, but the Bhagavatam's a whole other thing. So what does Balaram do? He says, all right, well, since the son is the same as the father, I'm going to make the son the speaker of the Bhagavatam. So he becomes now the in charge of that assembly of sages. And so this beginning of the Bhagavatam, you have the sages asking questions of Sutta Goswami, who had just heard Sukadev Goswami speak the Bhagavatam. And he tells them this whole story about that. Of course, before he tells them that, there's a kind of a history he has to get together, you know, and that's a history of Parikshit Maharaj and all the transitions that happen there. So here you have, you know, it literally starts with Narada and Vyasa's deep meditation, seeing the Bhagavatam in front of him, and then writing the Bhagavatam down, right? And then the sages are further asking questions. So, you know, how did Parikshit Maharaj end up there? You know, this is a great king. You know, how did he end up there? So then it explains the Battle of Kurukshetra. Actually explains Ashvatthama killing the 5 sons of Draupadi and then trying to kill Parikshit in the womb of Uttara. And then the Lord saving Parikshit, and then Parikshit being cursed by the Brahmin boy, to die in 7 days, and he accepting the curse, and then going to the bank of the Ganges and sitting down and asking the question, what should a man hear at the time of death? You know, and again, these are all stories for us. You know, what should we hear at the time of death? You know, death is there. I mean, I feel it. It's interesting. I feel it more and more every minute. You know, I've been in this body a long time, or relatively speaking. But there again, I've also been a devotee a number of years, so it's kind of like it gives me hope that somehow or another, maybe there'll be hope at the time of my passing, that by all your mercy, I can, you know, at least in my next life, make progress. So we're all, you know, that is the purpose of Krishna consciousness. It's like George Harrison said, he wrote a song, he called it The Art of Dying. That's what Krishna consciousness is. It's the art of dying. It's not how we live, it's how we die, because how we live will determine how we die, you see? So, you know, devotees like Narada Muni, they're there to teach us how to die, how to leave this body, the art of dying. And it's interesting how Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, he used to coin this phrase, which was from some European philosopher, but he would say, die to live. Because every transition that we go through is actually a mini death. That's the idea of it, you see. So we are all in the process of dying, but we should take every realization as a death of our ego, is one more chipping away at that ego. What is that ego that we possess? the idea that I am this or I am that. You know, I'm a white, Scottish, even devotee. You know, if we think in terms of my body, that, you know, I'm this Brahmin or something like that, then that's just false ego. Really, who we are is, you know, dasa dasa anudasa. There has to be humility. There has to be deep dainya, this idea that you know, we're truly insignificant. And then that will lead to a much greater realization that any number of books that we ever read, or any number of verses that we ever remember, or any number of things that we achieve, so-called things that we achieve in this life is only meant for one thing. It's only meant for service. And what service do we do? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smanam, Parasevanam, Archanam, Vanam, Dasham, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. The 9 processes, just take any one of them, you could be perfect, right? So what are we given? Shravanam, hearing, Kirtanam, chanting. These 2 are the most important, especially in our neophyte stage. Every day we should dedicate ourselves to chanting and hearing. Every day. And every day we should make ourselves think, what will I achieve today? What is it that I can achieve today? What service can I do? Just like every day we worship our deities here. We have for many, many years. And I get the great privilege of putting the deities to rest. So my wife wakes them up, bathes them every morning, and then in the evening, I'll make an offering, sometimes at least. Sometimes she'll make the offering, but then we'll make the offering, take it to the deities. And every time I do this, I always think, Brajanathan Halada, Nitai Gauranga, please accept this. Just somehow or another, give me the humility to make this offering, to really try and make some kind of progress through all my layers of false ego. In any case, you know, that's what we should do. We should somehow or another every day dedicate ourselves and then rededicate ourselves. Otherwise, Krishna consciousness can become mundane. It can actually become just like a religious duty that we perform. It's way beyond that. It has to be way beyond that. So we have to feel just this depth. We have to go beyond where we're at right now to some other place. And we only do that through service. In fact, the only thing Krishna gives us is service. There's nothing else we get. We only get service. And, you know, so even if you make millions of dollars and you don't spend it in service, it's kind of worthless. Truly, it's worthless. And when you get to my age, you'll kind of realize that. You'll kind of say, okay. But still, we should always be planning to do something more, something more, and something more. So anyway, I don't want to extend this too long. I wanted to just kind of, I heard years ago that a good class is about 20 to 40 minutes long. And then it's always nice to have a few questions. If anybody has questions, you know, that would be a good thing. So let me see. Is there anything anyone?
Pranam, Indranuja Prabhu.
Haribo.
Shamananda here.
Oh, thank you.
So I became curious about your deities, and do you want to tell the story of how they came to your house? And
sure. We have 3 sets of deities. So the first deities are Nitai Gauranga. They're small Gaur-Nitai deities. And in 1985, we were staying at, I was serving at Devasiddhan Mandir in Detroit. And my daughter had just been born and my son was 1.5 years old, my eldest son. And having little kids in the house, it was kind of difficult to get to the temple all the time. So we decided to buy a little set of deities just so that the kids would be able to worship the deities in the house. So we've been worshiping the Tigerunga since 1985. And then about 12 years ago, a friend, a godbrother of mine happened to be staying at my house, and he worshipped Shalagram Shila. He had a bunch of Shalagrams. And he offered to give us a Shalagram, this beautiful Shalagram Shila. And my wife was kind of hesitant because she was worried that it's a huge commitment, Shalagram's a big commitment. So she said, well, I don't think I want to do it now. But anyway, he came back a few times. He was coming back and forth to Kansas quite a lot at that time. And he, in any case, at one point, she said, all right, okay, I'll take. And the plan was that she was going to worship him as Krishna, Vrajanath. So he said, okay, I'm going to send him FedEx from Arizona. So weeks went past and nothing happened. So we called him up. We said, oh, what happened? He says, oh, yeah, I was going to send him, but I just dropped him in the mail instead. So on Ekaraji, one Friday, along comes this beautiful Shalagram Shila named Vrajanath to our house. So we had a big festival. We just decided, even though it was Ekaraji, we cooked a huge feast and invited all the Vasis. We're in a little community called Bhaktivan. So everybody came and we all celebrated. And then there was a devotee living with me who had another Shalagram, but this was a Shalagram of Anantadev. And he gave us that Shalagram. So then we had two Shalagrams, one of Krishna and one of Balaram. So we now had Krishna and Balaram. It was kind of interesting. So we got a little, if I could, well, do you want to go for a walk, guys? I'll take you to the temple. How's that? Sound good? And then you can see the deities. And then we got another friend of mine had a Nrsingadev deity, and he left to go back to Europe, and he asked us to take care of him. So we now have Nrsingadev also. It's kind of nice. I've always liked the worship of Nrsingadev. I always felt very comfortable with him. Okay, let's see. So I'm walking up the stairs to my temple room. This is my temple room. You can see there, you can see outside is the weather's quite nice now, so that's Tulsi Devi. And then this is my altar. So,
wow.
Just to show you. So we have nice parampara, Nrsingadev. This is Vrajanath and Haladar. I can't really see if you can see it properly, but oh yeah, there you are. Vrajanath and Haladar. And there's the Tigerunga. Oh, very beautiful. They've just been bathed this morning. The Vrajanath and Haladar gets bathed every morning, but the rest of the deities get bathed once a week. So they all get very nice and shiny. And there's our parampara. There's Guru Maharaj. I like these pictures. These pictures were actually painted for me by a devotee in England. Pictures of the parampara. So thanks. Anyway, so yeah, I feel very fortunate. I'm going to actually walk onto the deck just to show you how beautiful Bhaktivan is. This is our backyard. Ah, nice. We've got our cows over in the field there. I'm just putting a new garden in, raised beds. So I'm in the middle of doing that. Anyway, that's where.
Are there cows from Audarya still there and alive?
Yes. Oh, yes. We have 3 cows from Adaria. Adbut is our little bull.
Oh, yes.
Raga, remember Raga?
Oh,
Or
yes.
Ditsy Redhead.
Yeah.
And Nandini.
Wow.
And then we had Dharma and Bhumi, but they passed away.
Yeah.
They were quite old.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were quite old. So yeah, that's our place. If anybody is ever this way, please come visit. We have a beautiful place. We have about 3 miles of trails, goes all over the property, and we have a nice river runs through the property also. Half the property is wooded, and the other half is grassland. We have three of Guru Maharaj's cows are here, and then actually 4 or 5 of Guru Maharaj's cows, because he also gave us another 2 cows. Guernseys, one's a bull, and the other one's a cow, and they live there. Next, my neighbor Krishna Das he has 4 cows in his field, and I have 3 cows in my field. So it's very nice.
Yeah, we hope to come someday.
Oh, I'd love to host you. So you just come whenever you like, you know. Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, where we are, statistically speaking, we are dead center in America. If you draw a line between Seattle and Miami, LA and New York, it would bisect right over back to Van. So we're kind of statistically the dead center of the country. So it's kind of easy to get to from any of the coasts or anywhere north, south, east, west, you know, quite nice. And we've been here 24 years, built this house and just kind of hung out, you know. It's kind of unusual. Most devotees don't stay places that long, you know, but somehow or another, by Krishna's mercy, we got to stay here, you know, and develop this beautiful property. And just, yeah, it's lovely. So.
Wow, amazing deities. Thank you for the tour.
Well, thank you for,
yeah.
It's kind of unusual, isn't it? I mean, it's like, I thought, well, what the heck? You asked about the deities. We'll take darshan, you know. It's nice. Nice. They're very merciful. Our deities are very kind, very merciful. I don't know if did you watch any of Padmanabha's classes when he was here?
Yes, all of them.
Okay, so that was in the temple room.
Yeah.
All his classes were in the temple room.
I finally made that connection. And I wanted to thank you for the class. And there's just 3 things that really stuck out to me. Is that okay to go ahead? Yeah.
Absolutely. Please do.
Okay.
I'd love that.
So I like what you said about the transitions that we go through is like a death of kind of an aspect of our ego.
Right.
I really like that. I also liked what you said about dedicate and rededicate ourselves to our process to Krishna, you know, every day, sometimes every moment, you know.
Right.
That really stood out to me. And also that we are the servant of the servant of the servant. Right. And that, you know, service is what as our process is what we do.
It's all you get. You don't get anything but service.
Yeah.
So, you know, don't ever be reluctant. If somebody asks you, if a devotee asks you to do something, just do it. Just enthusiastically do it. Even if you're tired, even if you don't want it. I mean, I could tell you stories. I was a brahmachari for 6 years, and I served many different sannyasis in that time. And there was one time, this one particular sannyasi who had been serving for some time asked me to drive him somewhere. And it was late at night, and I'd been up since 2 a.m. And I remember thinking, this is crazy. You know, this isn't safe. And he said, it'll be fine. Krishna will protect you. I just need to get to, you know, so I drove this to, and everything was fine. But, you know, I think you have to be sensible, of course, also. But I think if a devotee asks you to do something and you really feel that you have faith in that devotee, just grab it with both hands. Just take the leap and try it. Of course, you've also got to think of your circumstances and stuff, but still, you know, the only thing you're going to get in this life is service. So whatever you've got, whatever it takes to grab that service, grab it.
Thank you. Also, you know, we were talking about Veda Vyas and how he wrote, it took 16 years to write the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he still wasn't satisfied.
Right.
And how Narada came and said, well, you missed, like you said, you missed the whole point. And so it just struck me how, wow, could we do the same thing? It's like chant for 16 years and miss the whole point, or, you know,
Really,
I mean, it happens, right?
I missed the point.
It can, yeah. But how important it is to really be focused and, you know, be hearing from the right sources and doing service and following, doing everything that's favorable for a Krishna consciousness and rejecting everything else. And so that that really made an impression on me too, just thinking about wow.
And don't forget the really important thing, sadhu sangha.
Yes.
You need sadhu sangha. You know, I mean, we are tested by our association. That's the real point, you know. And it was, I'll tell you a great story. So when Padmanabha Swami came here, I had met him just before that in North Carolina. So I'd heard him give class and all the rest, but I'd never met him before, right? So I met him in North Carolina. We really hit it off. He already had his ticket to come here and everything. So he came here, and I was a little apprehensive because nobody knows him, you know. So we have a community here, maybe, you know, I think the biggest festival we ever had was about 120 devotees. And when Guru Maharaj came, he came a couple of times. I think like typically there were 30 or 40 devotees in the class, you know. So we have a decent sized community. It's not tiny. Anyway, so I was a little apprehensive. I didn't know who was going to come to this class. I told everybody we have our own Facebook page. We advertised it. So the first couple of times there was only maybe 3 or 4 people. And then that first weekend, I think maybe 20 people showed up for the classes. But the second week was amazing. It was like, all of a sudden, every single Vasi here was just fired up. They were just like, everybody was thinking differently, you know. He had really, if you listen to them classes, you'll see what I mean. He really makes you think differently. You get out of your comfort zone and you start to question all your assumptions. This is the role of the sadhu. The sadhu makes you question your assumptions, makes you think, is this the right thing that I'm doing? You know, is this what I should be doing? Is it, all that stuff. And there were devotees here who had been, you know, really had fixed ideas about certain things that I had never been able to change their mind about. He came and it was like, boom. They were just going, wow. So that's the power of the sadhu. If you ever get a chance, invite Padmanabha Swami to your place. he will shake things up. Trust me, it will be a good thing.
I agree. He's such a great teacher. And when I first started listening to him, I definitely had a few transitions. So I'm very
Wonderful.
grateful for that. Yeah, thank you.
You're very fortunate, so well done.
You as well.
I'm very fortunate. I know. I wish I could take advantage of it, but yeah, no doubt about that. Well, Prabhus, if there's no other questions or no other points, you know, my last class will be next Friday. Now, I think I'm planning to give it on Prabhupada. That was my thought, at least, to talk about Srila Prabhupada and just his transitions and even how his transitions affected me in so many ways, you know. So that's my plan. And by Krishna's mercy, maybe next week we will see you all again. I certainly hope so. Thank you very much for your kindness. Vanchakalpa Trubhischa, Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha, Patitanam Pavani Vaishnavi.
Shriman Indranuja Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Yay.